mute myself, no video. And then I'm gonna, there we go. Okay. So, hi guys, my name is Justin Pratama. I'm a freshman computer science major, and I'm the engagement director for the XR Club and a mentor for the XR Club. So at the end, we're going to send out feedback reviews. I'm the guy who, reads all those reviews and compiles them together to data to give to leadership. And as a mentor, I also have to teach a workshop once per semester. And that workshop is going to be the introduction to Unity. This is going to be the first part. I'm also going to be teaching the second part next week. To give you guys a little bit of background on my Unity skills, right? I'm more of a beginner level Unity individual. Like I don't know Unity as deeply as say like Sahil or Jason does, right? But I was able to pick it up pretty quickly. Enough to the point where I could teach you some of the more bare bones, like basic concepts of Unity, right? And to give you a brief summary of what this workshop will entail, we're just mainly going to talk about the Unity Hub, creating a new project, all the little details of the project screen, from the interface to, all the assets and stuff like that. And we're also going to start building towards a zombie survival game towards the end. And although we are the XR Club, this workshop is not oriented towards any XR development, but it's just an introduction to the software or a software that you could use for XR development, right? And you guys don't have to be a CS major to, participate in this workshop. So what is Unity? Unity is a cross-platform game engine developed by Unity Technologies, right? It's essentially just a game engine that you could use to build 3D applications like games, AR, VR apps, and etc. And you could actually build a lot of things outside of games with Unity. You could build films, architectural visualization, short films, simulations. And if you guys have ever walked in like one of the more modern McDonald's, they would have those like touch screen LED screens that you could actually order stuff on. Yeah, that was all built with Unity. And some games that you might have played that have been built with Unity are Among Us, Cuphead, and Escape from Tarkov. So we're gonna open up the Unity Hub here, and you just click on that there. And I'm gonna talk to you guys a little bit about some of the tabs. Before I go on, do any of you guys have any questions, concerns? You guys don't also have to ask me. You could ask one of our mentors in the back there. But okay. So here we have the four main tabs. This is just mainly to manage your downloads down here below. But we have the project tab. That's the first tab you should be on. And essentially it's where you store your projects. We'll get back to this a little bit later, but for now, that's where, you create and store your project. And then you have the installs tab, right? And it's a place in the hub where you can manage different versions of Unity. And you might ask yourself, why would you install different versions of Unity? You might be using different versions to develop different projects, right? Like a game studio can start working on a newer version of Unity, but have other existing games that are built on earlier versions. So this would be where you would manage like all of your different versions of Unity. And there are two main versions that you guys should know, right? There's the tech version, which is the latest version of Unity you should use if developing new applications, and the LTS or long-term support version, which has extended support for 2 years. And since if you have already like published a game and you just want to maintain it, you probably just want to make quick bug fixes and don't want to spend time upgrading projects to newer versions of Unity or use new Unity features. You also have the Learn tab here, right? And to put it simply, It's where you learn stuff about Unity. The Learn section is an excellent resource in the Unity Hub to educate yourself on the different features of Unity. If you have a spare 2 hours, I highly recommend trying the rollerball project. And here, I'll just open it up. And all it does is that it takes you to this website and gives you all these tutorials on how to create the rollerball game. But this project is excellent for building like foundational, fundamental skills of Unity. All of the tutorials and documentation, this tab will help, like if you do any of these, they will help build your mastery of Unity. Lastly, we have the community tab, and it's where stuff is posted by the community. You have the Unity blog. If you have any questions, you can go to Unity Answers. If you have more questions, you could go to forums, or you could see like awesome projects here. You get a lot of help. You could play some other projects that people have created. And you could also give feedback to like certain teams and stuff with the Unity Pulse. For now, we're going to go back to projects and we're going to create a new project. So when you create the new project, or when you create a new project, you'll be taken to this screen. And the first thing you'd see is the templates. Unity has multiple templates depending on the type of project you want to create. Say like a 2D project, like, Mario, it's on a 2-dimensional like axis. That's what 2D is. There's 3D. And then there are the HDRP and URP versions which are just like higher graphical versions of the 3D, right? And then you have VR and AR. One of the mentors here, Ian, is actually going to do an intro to VR within the next couple of weeks. So you guys should definitely attend that, right? And then you have third person, first person, and other templates. And they're all organized in these little tabs too. So you'd have like the core templates, the main ones that you might want to use. You'd have sample templates that have like built-in like scenes or levels that you could kind of like explore and mess around with the different features of these like special templates. And then you have learning templates to help you build skills. But for now, all we're gonna do is go back to all templates, select 3D, and make sure you're running the right version of Unity, of the Unity editor, the 2021.2 Silicon version. That would be for Mac, but I assume it also say 2021.2 for Windows. And be sure to also name your project. For the sake of this workshop, I'm just gonna say intro, I can't spell, intro to Unity. And make sure you put it in whatever file you'd want. So create the project. This might take a minute depending on what device you're running. Our president, Jason, wants me to make fun of Windows users because it tends to take longer to load. But I don't discriminate between Mac and Windows. I love everyone. So I'm gonna wait a minute. Everybody should be looking up when you guys have it loaded. Raise your hand if you guys need help with anything. Okay. No, not yet. Sorry. Wait, have you loaded up yet? Okay.
I don't know how I set it up, but like the past few days, it was just like it took like 20 minutes. 20 minutes that was enough. We're not quite good at this. Oh, because some people will be so small. You need a microscope. This is why I actually thought about
Okay, so I'm gonna move on. So getting to know the Unity editor. First thing that you would see, right, is the Unity editor interface. You have your scene view, your toolbar. Actually, this is overlays, but I'll get to that later. You have your hierarchy, your project window, your console, your game view, and the inspector. All of these little windows are essential to building your project. First things first, we're going to talk about your toolbar, right? You have the play and pause and step controls in the center. You have your, Unity buttons on the left, and then you have like these layout options on the right. And the first thing here is your account button, and then you have the cloud button, which accesses Unity's cloud services for games. And then you have Plastic SCM, which is a version control system owned by Unity. So like imagine Git, if you know what it is. And it's basically a collaboration tool between groups. You have the play, pause, and step button for when you want to like run your game in the game view. And then you have the undo button, which allows you to undo to like previous versions of your project. You have the search button up here, which allows you to search anything in the hierarchy or in the project, right? And then you have layers, which allow you to travel between different layers of your scene. And you have your layouts. Now, it is crucial for you to understand, the interface, like the hierarchy, the scene, the game, project console and stuff, before you want to like change your layouts. All right. If you were to like, change your layout to say here, the floor split, everything moves. You don't know where anything is, right? If you just memorize the default layout, you wouldn't know, where you need to do certain things. So it's important to remember where the hierarchy, the scene, or what the hierarchy, the scene, and the game view, and the inspector all mean. So let's switch back to default. So next we have the hierarchy window, and it's basically a window that holds all the objects in a scene. It gives you the ability to create, delete, select, and duplicate game objects in a scene. And let's create a cube. Okay, so you have this search bar that allows you to search for any objects here in the hierarchy, but you could also create things with this plus button, or you could right click and then go to here, these. But let's add a cube game object. So press the plus button and then go to 3D objects, and you should see cube right here. Add a cube there. So another upside of the hierarchy is you could also hide game objects. So I press this button, it's gone, it disappears, no cube. Okay, I'm on top of that. And then there's also like a touch select option here, which allows you to toggle between selecting in this, or toggle your select when you select it in the scene view. So for example, like in the scene view, I could click on it and then it tells me, all of its information. But if I were to toggle it, right, I cannot touch it. Won't tell me anything. And I actually just have to go through it in the hierarchy. So next, we have the inspector window, and it basically describes the details of whatever game object is selected. The inspector window provides information on the different properties of a game object and how to change the functionality of said game object. You can modify assets and prefabs outside of this. And we're gonna talk about all of the different things here a little bit later. So you also have the project window, and this window holds assets that can be used in a scene. So imagine assets as like spice in a spice cabinet, right? They could be sound files, 3D models, and a bunch of other stuff. And they're all things that you could put in your scene, to further your project. And here it will display all the files, and you can navigate to find different files. We only just have this scene file for now. And it also has its own toolbar. So if you press the plus button here, you could create a new folder similar to this one, new scripts and stuff like that. And it also has a search bar here that allows you to search for anything in there. Then you have your scene view. I've talked about this a little bit. But yeah, here you can select, move, position, and manipulate game objects in the scene view to change their behaviors and positions. So here, I'm going to tell you how to navigate in your scene. So you could use your mouse, say your right click to rotate, or you could use like I know an option on Mac, you can kind of like rotate around your cube here, right? You could also kind of just move around with Command Option or Control Alt. And you could just left click to select your game object. You could scroll in and out. You could also use your arrow keys, the up and down ones, to scroll in and out. You could use left and right to kind of like pan around, right? Okay. So these things are called overlays, and it's essentially just a toolbar that helps you manipulate like the game object you have in the scene. Here you have the view tool, which is kind of like similar to the stuff I said previously in the last slide, right? And then you have the movement tool, which allows you to manipulate the movement of your game object or whatever you have selected through the X, the Z, and the Y axis. Then you have the rotate tool, which allows you to kind of manipulate the orientation of your game object. So as you can see, I'm just messing around with the rotations here. And then you have your scale tool, which allows you to change like the size of your game object. And then this center cube here will allow you to kind of change it in all directions. And then you would just have this transform tool, which basically combines like the three previous tools together. So you can just rotate, you can move it, you can go up and down. And these panels here allow you to move it between two different axes. Do any of you guys have any questions?
What did you click to get to that like thing where you can integrate the object?
It's just the toolbar.
Okay. I'll create a new project.
Okay. So. And these are more overlays, and the basic ones you need to know are here. This is the center / pivot, and it moves on the direction based on the center of the game object or the model's pivot. And this is the global and local, which change the movement / direction of an object based on the rotation of the center of a game object. So I would mess around with these, but it's not, you wouldn't really be able to tell the changes with the cube. So I'll show you it later when I implement an asset, what these two really do. And then you have, the grid view. Here you can see it's kind of like hard to see on that screen. Oh, but there's a little grid there. And you have gizmos here, and it toggles the ability of all gizmos. So like this directional light or this camera, right? They have gizmos, but you just press that, boop, they disappear. I'll click it again. There you go. So then there's the game view, right? And it's based on whatever camera you set it on. For now, it's like the main camera. And it basically displays from the main camera. And essentially, it's where you can test out the game when you click play. Do not like make changes to any of your game objects or your files or anything when you have play on, because then it just like, it won't save any of the changes. I kind of made the mistake, or this is a mistake I've made like frequently in the past. And even recently, like I would just have the game view playing and I would just make changes here and it wouldn't save anything. Right. So, yeah. Then finally, you have the console, and it's basically where any of the debug messages, your print statements or errors like null pointer exceptions and so on from your scripts would appear, from when you code stuff would appear. So, any questions? No? Okay. So we're going to move on to the basic building blocks of Unity. Unity has basically 3 different levels. You have your scene here, you have game objects, and then you have components here, right? So your scene. A scene basically encapsulates the area or the setting that you want to build it. If you were like an artist, a scene would be your canvas. And you are free to do with this canvas whatever you imagine. You're not limited to a single scene. You can implement multiple scenes here. And imagine just having an art gallery of multiple canvases, or just a video game with multiple levels, right? Those are your scenes. And a scene holds all the game objects that it would have in that specific scene. And it's a container for the containers. Now, game objects, right? Fundamentally, a game object is a container for components. So imagine a root of a tree with components as nodes, a fridge with food, and you add the food to the fridge for like consuming. A little fun fact, all game objects have this transformed component, right? A game object can be any object in your scene, whether it be a player, a camera, a shape, a terrain, a light, or even empty, but they act as like a container of sorts for components. You can have empty game objects, which just have like a transform component, which is this thing. It would just have this. And it's good for organizing and grouping game objects together. You could have primitives, which are just placeholders, kind of like this cube, or primitive And you can use primitives to map out your games and where you want game objects to be. They're simple, primitives are simple 3D game objects that you provide, your cubes, your spheres, your capsules, your cylinders, all primitives. And you can kind of use primitives as like a measuring tool. So when you create a game, a primitive will always have like, well, I kind of messed around with the scale here, but they would always consistently be like 1, 1, and 1. That's always going to be their size. Then there are prefabs. We're not really going to mess around with prefabs this time around. Next week we will when we, fully develop our game. But essentially, it's the blueprint for a game object. Instances are easily recognizable in the hierarchy, as you can see here in the slides. They're usually just blue. That's how you can tell it's a prefab. And it makes it simple to edit multiple game objects of the same type and see changes to instances. We're going to move on to questions. Okay. Now we're going to move on to components. To define what a component is, it is what gives a game object its properties and functions. So imagine components are the different mods that you could add, right? Components are just parts that can be attached to a game object, defines a set of behaviors and properties. So let's explore the inspector here for components of this cube. Okay. Now, I got some questions for you guys. Does this game object in and of itself have a position and orientation? Like just by itself, this game object?
Yeah. We'll do a show of hands.
Yeah, we could do a show of hands. So a yes, raise your hand, be brave. Oh, okay, a lot of brave people. No, components are what give it its properties and behaviors. Game objects are just like containers. This is a container for this, okay? It doesn't have its own position. It's meaningless without components, right? And the first component, which every game object has, is just the transform. And it's the place where a game object size, scale, and orientation can be manipulated. You could set specific positions of game objects by setting their coordinates, So I could use these tools to kind of like change the coordinates, see how it's moving there, right? Or I could change its rotation by using these tools. I could just input values in here too. And then I could just change its scale. Here, you can also move values. Okay. Next question. Does this game object in and of itself have a shape? Raise your hand for yes, be brave, come on now. No? No? 2 no's? Okay, no. The components are what give it its properties, right? So the shape would be from the mesh, and it basically defines the look of the game object, just like the bare like 3D model. All right, and then you have the mesh renderer, which does the graphical processing behind the scenes to display the mesh to the screen, making use of the properties defined by the materials you provided, kind of like colors or lights and stuff like that. So does this game object in and of itself interact with physics?
Show of hands.
Yes, no?
How many say yes? How many say no?
Okay. No. Okay, just no. Right? The mesh collider or the box collider for this cube, right, is basically what the physics system sees, So now we're going to go to project and we're going to create a new folder, or we want to actually just change the color of this cube, right, to a different color. And by doing that, we would want to create and add a material there. So we're going to go to projects, go to assets, right, and then press create. and then folder at the top there. Okay. We're gonna name it materials. Now, the reason I'm showing you guys how to create folders and stuff like that is that you want to keep things organized. You want your materials to be in your materials. You want your, trees to be in your environment folder, and et cetera, et cetera. You don't want to be a mess. Okay. So we're also gonna open the materials folder now, and we're just gonna add a material. And we're gonna change this cube to say, let's say red. I'm gonna call it a red color. You guys could change it to whatever you want. And you're just gonna press this white bar here. It opens up a nice color wheel. You can change it to any color you want. I'm gonna go with red. And I'm just gonna drag this material onto this box. Do you guys have any questions? No? Okay. Okay. Okay, so yeah, you just look, you made the folder, you're inside the folder, and then you have this plus button on the left, or you could right click your folder, and then you press material here, right? And then you have the new material, you name it, and then select material, and then you click on this bar, this like color bar. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna move on. So outside of materials, if you guys remember what I said about assets, they could be 3D models, they could be sounds, they could be lighting, they could be all sorts of things. And you might be wondering, right? Where do I get assets? So you could actually go, I'm not sure what the Windows equivalent of this is, but if you go to the package manager here, right? Now, this is a place where you would import your assets, right? Or any packages. And Unity actually just has some packages built in that you could download here. Maybe you'd want like a cinematic camera or something like that. You get it here and you download it onto your project. But you might also be wondering, like, can I buy assets? Of course you can. If you just open your favorite web browser, you could go to the Unity Asset Store. And basically, it's just an online marketplace for you to buy and sell assets that you might have made. You could get this cool mega animation or dreamscape and etc. Stuff like that. And hypothetically, we're all broke college students. I can't be affording, I can't afford $50 just for like some virtual like thing, right? So you could just, search up whatever, and on the right, if you go to pricing, there should be this checkbox for like free assets. But what if, you're like me, you like things super cheap, you don't really like legal things. You'd want to get your assets, that are higher quality than this, but are also free. You could go to like third-party websites like this one, this is Kenny Assets. And the reason I bring this up is because I want you guys to download this. There should be a link in the Discord to get here, or you could just go, Kenny Assets, Google, click on the first link, and then go here and then type in graveyard. And there you go. So just download it. There should be a zip file, and then you open it. I'm not going to do it because I already did it. Yeah. So you could import your Unity assets through the package manager, or you could show this, or you could do it this way, this kind of like advanced, super high tactic way, right? You just pull up your recent downloads. It's right there. I also have a folder where I put it in, and all you got to do is drag your ghetto assets here, and it's going to load for a second. Okay, do you guys have any questions, any problems? Please refer to our mentors.
Have the models loaded in for everyone?
Yeah,
We'll wait a few minutes.
okay.
How was that? So yeah, just a quick announcement here. Make sure to unzip the folder before you drag the folder in. Don't just put it in the zip folder. Is anyone still importing the assets?
Okay. So now we're gonna build our game, right? Using all the knowledge that we just learned. Okay. So first things first, I'm gonna teach you a concept, right? So it's called parenting. 1 second. Okay. So what is parenting? It's basically organization over the different game objects in a scene through parent and child. Imagine creating like an empty game object that you could set properties to and have game objects under it. Other game objects could be contained within an object and inherit its properties. You can connect game objects to help move, scale, or transform a group of game objects. When you move the top level object, also known as a parent game object, you will also move all the children inside of it. So we're going to get rid of this cube. Right? I'm going to right click it. I'm just going to delete it. Now we're going to create an empty game object. So press create here, or you can right click 3D or no, create empty. I'm going to name this empty game object environment. Next. So this empty game object will act kind of as our parent. I'm not really going to mess with this one, kind of like how parenting describes it. I just want to have it here so it can organize like the environment of our scene or the level of our game, because I'm going to be adding like all sorts of assets to it. And I don't want to have like 50 trees like popping up on the hierarchy here. But first things first, we're going to create a plane, a surface for where our player can stand on. I'm just going to name this plane. And I'm going to drag this ground into the environment. Now we have a parent and a child. For the ground, I'm going to change the X and Z axis. By 50 for each. I don't know about you guys, but I do not like this white color. So we're going to change it through green. Now, how would we change the color of this plane? Raise your hand. Come on, be brave, man. Materials. I heard that somewhere. Nice. So we're just going to create a new material. Press this little plus button on the top left. Go to material. And I'm just going to say grass color. I want it to be green. Okay. And again, I'm going to click this. Green, green here. And all I'm going to do is just drag it in here. Wow, we have a green plane. Okay, now we're going to create another empty game object. Actually, no. We're actually just going to place a cylinder in here. Sorry. This is going to be the body of our player. Now you can press F to focus, or you can just scroll in. Oh, actually. Game object, I pressed F there. And we're just going to move this guy up a little bit. Here, just a little bit above. Now, we also want to move in first person, right? So we can't just have the camera in this random position where when we play the game, it's just going to follow us from under the plane, which is clicked. So what we want to do is group it together with the player so that the camera moves consistently with the player. And how we're going to do that is we're going to move that main camera into the player and have it as a child. And we're going to reset our transform. Click these three little dots here on the transform and press reset. And it should move your camera up here or just on the player. And we're going to move this guy a little bit vertically or on the y-axis so he could be kind of like face level. And we already have this color, the red color here, and we're just going to place it on our player so he doesn't have like a basic gray color. So do you guys have any questions? Any concerns?
Does everyone have their player all set up? Attached to it at the head? Anyone having any trouble?
Does
Uh,
it matter that there's not a shadow? She's using a shadow in this.
What's the sense of coding out
Okay,
there?
so how do we get this guy to move, right? We would need a script. And essentially, I've talked about components before, right? But what if there's something you want to do that isn't handled by like a specific component or a property you want to keep track of, like a score? You can make your own custom component using a script or use scripting. And essentially, a script is the C# code that defines a component. Even components you use like the transform here, right? They're all scripts made by Unity. It's just a bunch of C# code that Unity already implemented to make like this component or this and so on. And in order to move your player around with the keyboard, we need to make a script. So we're gonna create another folder because we love staying organized here. Create this plus button, folder. I'm gonna name it to scripts. Click inside. And we're gonna create a new C# script. So press the plus button. On the top there, you should see C# script. And we're gonna rename it to player move. Okay. Now, I cannot emphasize this enough. The name of your class must be the same of the file, okay? Yeah. Or your preferences. If you really don't have the same name or you decide to rename your file down the line, look out for this because it will give you like an error. So we're gonna open our
Preferences, the code editor.
the what?
Code editor preferences. Making sure.
Well, that's
Oh.
this here.
No. In the Unity, right? Making sure it opens up in Visual Studio.
Oh, yeah, okay, wait, before I go on, sorry, I had a blunder. If you go to edit, or no, if you go to your preferences, for me, it'd be Unity and preferences. Make sure that your external tools is set to Visual Studio. For Mac, it'd be Visual Studio for Mac, but I'm not sure what it would be on the Windows and stuff like that.
You'll be like Visual Studio, or you can use Visual Studio Code, C# Writer, or those are like some of the common C# IDEs. The main thing it's important to have this set is because it will allow you to Unity to load in the code auto code completion features, which makes your job a lot easier because you can see the autocomplete and more functions are available. If you don't do this, those might not load. You just might have a harder time, just figuring out what you need to code there. On Windows, it's edit preferences, but yeah, we showed on Mac, it's Unity preferences. Just make sure you have that set before you open up the script.
Okay. So you have your component properties, right? You can customize your components in your script so that it can appear in the inspector window immediately. For example, when you want your player to move faster or possibly jump higher, right? You can set them as instance variables, implement them in methods, and see the values in the inspector window. I'm not really going to do this now or I'm not going to show you an example now because we're short for time, but I will show you when we're going to make the movement of this guy. So basically you can include references to whether game objects or components, and you could organize it with like headers and stuff like that. So there in Unity, there's something called the script lifestyle. And essentially Unity looks for certain event functions defined by components, right? For instance, imagine you are Mario and you want to collect all the coins in the scene or all the levels in the scene. You need to constantly be aware of whether Mario is hitting a coin at all times. So you look at this little graphic here, right? You'd have the start function and it would run everything inside of it. right? As soon as you start up the game. But, you know, let's say hypothetically Mario hits a coin, right? It would update the game and your score, it would add the score +1. It would go from 0 to 1. It would remove that coin, right? It would update the game. It would render it, and then it would output it in the GUI, and then it would, you know, loop again. Mario gets another coin. That's 2 coins now. So it update, render GUI. Mario gets 3 coins. Update, render GUI, and so on. And the 2 most common methods that you would see are the start method and the update method. And the start method is basically a method that is called when the script is called, right? Initially used before any updates, and it's only called once, okay? Once this is called, it doesn't, you know, do anything again. And then there's the update method, which is called with every frame, every time the screen is updated. And in order for the player to move, the script must be called multiple times. Then you have the debug output to console. There are 3 different levels, right? Debug log for general messages, debug log warning for warnings, and debug log error for actual errors. You could toggle different types of logs in the editor. And if you actually go to the console, if you guys remember, after you guys implement or imported the third-party assets, it actually gave you these errors or these warnings, I guess. And yeah, you could click to get the detailed stack traces of these warnings. But for now, I'm just going to clear them. Now, there's a website called Unity Documentation. I think I mentioned it before, but if I haven't, it's essentially the Unity Bible. You know, anything you need to know about Unity, you could learn it here, right? If you want to know what the asset workflow input, you know, anything with the graphics, Unity Bible. For now, all we want to do is we want to get our player to move. So this is our player object. How would we get him to move? Which component allows this guy to kind of move around? Raise of hands. Exactly, the transform. How would we find out the different features of the transform component? I just said it. It was just that slide. Exactly, Unity Bible or Unity documentation. So to access the documentation of it, like a specific component, you could just click this little exclamation or question mark here, right? On the transform of the player, boop, takes you to transform. It tells you everything about the transform component, but we want to use it for scripting to move. So switch to scripting, this, right? And we're going to scroll down. It has all these different methods that you could use. But for now, we want to change its like position, right? We want to be able to manipulate where it moves, how it moves, etc. So here we go to position, and whoa, it already made a preset script for us to move the position of whatever game object we selected. So, you know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you create a new project, right? I don't want to have to memorize how to like, you know, move this guy, or sometimes I just forget, and I would need to know where I could go to just figure out how to like move a game object. You know, use the Unity documentation. They might just have a script that specifically fits, you know, your needs. So we're just going to copy this, right? Now be sure, remember, this is called player move. All right, this has to be consistent. So I'm just going to paste this, but I'm going to change this to player move. It will create errors if you do not change it. Okay. So if you guys remember about the custom components, this is a custom component that can manipulate your movement speed. And essentially, hold on, I'm going to save this real quick. if you go, oh, I didn't even add the script. So wait, you go back to your project and you go to scripts, be sure to add the script to the player, right? Or you could add the component
Which documentation did you get this from?
transform. And it should appear right here, right? We want to convert this to public so that we could see it. Wait for it. Ta-da! Look, we can manipulate our speed here, right? That was the point of the custom component. So let's say we want to move 10 or 5, right? And they gave us these horizontal input and these vertical inputs to kind of gauge our positions, on the axis. And it basically, Unity has this like transform.position method that essentially moves your position depending on the movement speed and the time. And time delta time is basically like your own separate time, separate of the frames. Because if you didn't have this, it would just update it by the frames. And that creates an issue because if you have a faster computer, you would just move faster because you generate more frames. So time delta time kind of evens everything out. And we want to actually move this vertical input. So copy and paste this because it goes X, Y, because vector 3 goes X, Y, and then Z, and we don't want to move on the Y, we just want to move on the X and the Z axis, right? Not Y, we want to move up. And all we have to do, oh shoot. Delete this. This 0 and move it here. Or you could just, switch things out. And there you go. You have a movement script. So save this script, should automatically update Unity. And now when we go to the game and we press play, you can move around. Now you can't tell, but hypothetically, let's say I place this cube. Oh, wait. I think we're out of time. Okay, so that was to implement this cube, place it in front, kind of just to show that we're moving. Look, we're moving, yay. Now I know you can't really move around with the mouse, but we'll get to that sometime next week. And to implement the asset that I talked about earlier, right? So if you go back to your assets, you could go to this folder that had all of your third-party assets. You could put this in like an environment folder, but for time, I'm not going to do that. Go to models, go to OBJ, and let's put in, see if I can find it, a tree. This beautiful pine tree asset. That's all you have to do. You just drag it from the folder onto your scene, or you could just drag it onto your hierarchy. And there you go. You now have a tree. Ta-da. Tree. And the last thing we're going to do is, I mentioned this before, but I'm going to show you guys the difference between center and pivot. So this would be centering, right? The movement is based on the center, but if you change it to pivot, it actually goes based off of, the lowest base. And this is mainly because developers or designers, they would actually create this model from the bottom up, right? So they would use like the pivot to kind of like move it based on that. And then you'd also have global and local. I'm going to change this back to center. And basically, if you do So let's say you rotate it, right? It's in global right now, right? And then you go to movement. You know, it's in line with the rest of the scene, with the access that the scene has. That's global. But if you were to set it to local, it would go in line with the center of the object. And that's our workshop for the most part. Some side objectives, you know, implement more trees, you know, add an environment game object, which I showed you to store them. You know, a medium side objective, you can make the skybox appear darker. You know, it's kind of like daytime. We want it to be a scary zombie game next week. So I'll show you how to change it to nighttime. But in the meantime, you guys could change it to nighttime. And a harder side objective is making your player like jump and sprint. And here are some excellent resources to learn Unity, right? You know, you have the Brackeys YouTube channel, Unity documentation, Unity answers. You could Google it. That's always the best like tool, or you can use Unity Learn. And feel free to contact us. You guys should also be receiving a feedback form in your emails. Please, please, please fill that out, okay? Because it helps us improve the club. And I'm going to be reading all the ones for this workshop. So I want to know how well I did. You know, if I did poor, let me know. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Yeah.